The sand stretched endlessly in every direction, crimson as dried blood under Kepler 442b's twin suns. Marcus Chen stood at the edge of the scorching grounds, sweat already beading on his forehead despite the early morning hour. Around him, 17 other candidates shifted nervously, 16 aliens from across the galaxy, and one human who probably shouldn't be here. "The trial of endurance begins now," announced Elder Vexai, her crystalline voice cutting through the desert wind. The Zephyrian leader towered 9 feet tall, her translucent blue skin shimmering in the harsh light. 6 arms gestured toward the wasteland. 36 hours, no water, no food, no shelter except what you can find or build. Marcus adjusted his worn utility belt and checked his pockets one more time. A multi-tool, some wire, a small mirror, not much, but it was what he had. The other candidates carried similar basic supplies. This wasn't about gear. It was about something deeper. "Those who survive earn citizenship in the Galactic Alliance," Vexai continued. "Those who fail—" She paused, letting the desert wind fill the silence. "Well, the desert decides." A Corvan with thick purple fur snorted through his trunk-like nose. "Why is the human even here? His species isn't advanced enough for membership." Marcus felt the familiar burn of anger in his chest, but kept his face neutral. He'd heard worse during his 3 years on Kepler 442b. Much worse. "Because," said a melodic voice behind him, "the humans saved my colony ship from pirates using nothing but spare parts and determination." Marcus turned to see Lyra approaching, her 4 arms carrying ceremonial water containers. The Andromedan's scales caught the light like emeralds, and her large black eyes held warmth that had become precious to him over the past year. She worked as a medical officer in New Harmony, the refugee settlement where Marcus had ended up after his transport ship broke down. "Lyra," he said softly, "you don't have to." "I do." She pressed a container into his hands, a ceremonial gesture since he couldn't take it into the desert. "You've earned this chance, Marcus. Don't let them make you forget that." The Corvan laughed, a sound like grinding metal. "Sentiment won't save him when the heat madness takes hold. Humans aren't built for extreme conditions." "We'll see," Marcus said quietly. Elder Vexai raised her arms. "The trial begins at the sound of the horn. You may not help each other once you enter the scorching grounds. The boundary extends 50 miles in all directions. There are no rules beyond survival." She paused, studying each candidate. "May the worthy find their strength." The horn sounded, a deep, resonant note that seemed to shake the desert itself. Marcus ran. Not toward the open sand where most candidates headed, but toward the rocky badlands to the east. He'd studied survey reports and geological data during his sleepless nights preparing for this. The scorching grounds weren't just empty desert. They were an ecosystem shaped by extreme conditions. Behind him, he heard the heavy footsteps of other candidates fanning out across the wasteland. Some moved in groups despite the rules, others struck out alone with confident strides. The Corvan was heading straight into the deep desert, trusting in his species' natural resistance to heat. Marcus reached the first cluster of rocks as the twin suns climbed higher. The temperature was already brutal, but it would get worse. Much worse. The scorching grounds earned their name during midday, when surface temperatures reached 70 degrees Celsius. Even the hardiest species would struggle. He found what he was looking for 20 minutes into the Badlands, a cluster of thornroot trees. Most people saw them as twisted, hostile plants, all spikes and bitter sap. But Marcus had spent his childhood on Mars Colony 7, where his botanist mother had taught him that every plant was solving a problem. The thornroots were massive, some reaching 30 feet tall. Their bark was thick and gray, covered in 2-inch spikes, but Marcus knew their secret. He pulled out his multi-tool and carefully selected the largest tree. These ancient plants were hollow inside, evolved to store water during rare rainfall. The first spike he touched drew blood. The sap burned his skin like acid. But Marcus had worked as a maintenance engineer on damaged spacecraft for 5 years. He knew how to work through pain. "Come on," he muttered, feeling for the right spot. "There's always a way in." He found it near the base, a section where the bark had been damaged, probably by some animal. The spikes were smaller here, more manageable. Using his multi-tool's blade, he began to carefully widen the gap. 30 minutes later, he had carved an opening large enough for his body. The inside of the thornroot was dark and cool, with curved walls that rose up into the tree's hollow core. It smelled of earth and rain, even on this desert world. Marcus crawled inside and examined his shelter. The walls were smooth, worn by years of stored water. He could stretch out comfortably, and the opening he'd made could be sealed from inside with some of the outer bark. But this was just the beginning. Surviving 36 hours would require more than shelter. He climbed back out and began his real work. The thornroots weren't just trees, they were an entire ecosystem. Their deep taproots drew water from underground aquifers. Their sap, while caustic on the surface, contained trace minerals, and their hollow cores, Marcus smiled grimly. They were natural cooling systems. Over the next 2 hours, as the suns climbed toward their peak, he gathered materials. Fallen bark pieces, dried seed pods from nearby scrub plants, small stones worn smooth by ancient flash floods. Most importantly, he found what his mother would have called the green zone, areas where the thornroot's root system created slightly different soil conditions. Other candidates passed by occasionally, struggling against the rising heat. He saw a tall cetacean stumbling toward the horizon, already showing signs of heat exhaustion. A pair of crystalline quartz folk moved with mechanical precision, but were clearly struggling with the temperature differential. None of them paid attention to the human crouched among the hostile thornroot trees. By noon, when the twin suns reached their zenith and the desert became a furnace, Marcus was sealed inside his hollow tree. The temperature outside climbed past 70 degrees Celsius. The sand itself was hot enough to burn exposed skin. Inside his thornroot shelter, it was merely uncomfortably warm. Marcus had used the morning to prepare. He'd collected dozens of small stones and placed them in strategic positions around the tree's interior. As the heat built up, these stones absorbed excess warmth during the day and would release it slowly during the cold desert night, a natural thermal regulator. He'd also made a discovery that might save his life. The thornroot sap could be processed, carefully scraped from the inner bark, diluted with his own saliva, and filtered through fabric torn from his shirt. It became a bitter but drinkable liquid. Not pleasant, but it contained electrolytes his body needed. As the hours passed, he heard sounds from outside. Footsteps stumbling past, voices calling out in various languages. Once, someone tried to break into his tree, clawing at the bark, but gave up when the spikes proved too vicious. The desert was claiming its victims. Marcus closed his eyes and tried to rest. The worst heat would last 6 hours. If he could endure that, he had a chance, if not. A scream cut through the air outside, high-pitched, desperate, definitely non-human. Marcus tensed, listening. Another scream, closer now. Someone was in real trouble. He pressed his eye to a gap in his shelter. Through the shimmering heat waves, he could see a figure collapsed about 50 meters away, small, covered in what looked like silver fur. One of the candidates. The rules were clear, no helping each other. Anyone who violated that would be disqualified immediately. But as Marcus watched, the figure tried to crawl toward his tree, leaving a trail in the sand. It was a young Valerian, barely adult by the look of her size. Her silver fur was matted with sweat and sand, and she was making small, desperate sounds. She wouldn't last another hour in this heat. Marcus stared through the gap, his conscience warring with his practical mind. He'd worked 3 years for this chance. Citizenship in the Galactic Alliance meant everything. Access to advanced medical care for the chronic lung damage he'd suffered in the mining accidents, the right to travel freely between worlds, protection from the species-based discrimination that had plagued him since leaving Earth. The Valerian collapsed completely, her small body going still. Marcus cursed under his breath and reached for the bark he'd used to seal his entrance. The heat hit Marcus like a physical blow as he crawled out of his shelter. The air itself seemed to burn, and the sand was hot enough to blister exposed skin. He wrapped his hands in torn fabric and ran toward the collapsed Valerian, the soles of his boots smoking with each step. She was unconscious when he reached her, her small body barely rising and falling with shallow breaths. Valerians were from a cold world. Their thick fur and compact bodies were adaptations for Arctic conditions, not desert survival. She was dying. "Stupid," Marcus muttered, scooping her up. "Absolutely stupid." Getting back to the thornroot tree was harder with her weight, even though she couldn't weigh more than 40 pounds. The heat was devastating, turning the air into a liquid furnace. By the time he made it back to his shelter, his shirt was soaked with sweat and his lungs burned with each breath. He dragged her inside and sealed the entrance behind them. The Valerian's name was Zira, according to the identification crystal around her neck. She was young, maybe equivalent to a human teenager, with large golden eyes and delicate features. Her fur was a beautiful silver blue, though now it was matted and dirty. "Come on," Marcus whispered, checking her pulse. Her heart was racing, but she was breathing. "Don't die on me now." He had limited medical supplies, but his years maintaining life support systems had taught him the basics. First priority was cooling her down. He used some of his processed thornroot sap to wet a piece of fabric and began wiping down her fur, letting evaporation do the work. Her eyes fluttered open after 20 minutes. "Where?" Her voice was barely a whisper, spoken in accented but clear standard. "You're safe," Marcus said. "You collapsed out there, heat exhaustion." She tried to sit up, then slumped back against the curved wall. "The trial, I have to." "You have to survive first." Marcus offered her a small cup of his filtered sap water. "Drink this slowly. It tastes awful, but it'll help." Zira stared at him with those large golden eyes. You saved me, but the rules." "I know the rules." "Then why?" Her voice cracked. "You could have been citizens of the Alliance. Your species needs that." Marcus was quiet for a moment, listening to the wind outside. The heat was so intense now that even the desert's normal sounds had fallen silent. "My mother always said that who you are in the worst moments defines who you are everywhere else." "Your mother was wise." Zira managed a small sip of the bitter liquid. "But now we're both disqualified." "Maybe, or maybe we find a way to both survive this." Zira looked around the hollow interior of the tree. "This is incredible. How did you know?" "Plants are problem solvers," Marcus said, echoing his mother's words. "They've been figuring out how to survive in impossible places for millions of years. We just have to be smart enough to learn from them." He explained how the thornroot worked, the hollow core for insulation, the deep taproot system, the sap processing. Zira listened with the intensity of someone whose life depended on understanding. "My people have stories about humans," she said eventually. "That you're adaptable, creative in ways that frighten others." "And what do you think?" She gestured around their shelter. "I think those stories might be true." They spent the afternoon hours talking quietly, conserving energy while the heat raged outside. Marcus learned that Zira was an engineer like him, specializing in atmospheric processing systems. She'd come from Velaris Prime after her world's primary city dome had failed, killing thousands. The Valerian government blamed the disaster on substandard, human-made components, making her family refugees. "So we're both running from something," Marcus said. "And both trying to prove something," Zira added. The worst heat began to pass as the twin suns started their descent toward the horizon. Through small gaps in their shelter, they could see the landscape shimmering with residual heat. In the distance, shapes moved, other candidates still alive, still struggling. There, Zira pointed to a cluster of rocks about 200 meters away. Something large, moving strangely. Marcus squinted through the haze. It was the Corvan who had mocked him earlier, but something was wrong. The purple-furred alien was stumbling, his movements erratic. "Heat madness," Marcus said. "He's hallucinating." They watched as the Corvan began attacking the rocks, apparently believing they were enemies. His species was naturally resistant to temperature extremes, but even they had limits. The scorching grounds had found his. "Should we?" Zira began. "No," Marcus's voice was firm. "He made his choice about whether species should help each other, and going out there now would kill us all." It was harsh but true. The temperature was still lethal outside their shelter. Helping the Corvan would mean 3 deaths instead of 1. They turned away as the Corvan's movements became more violent, more desperate. "This trial," Zira said quietly, "it's not really about survival, is it? It's about proving something, about who deserves to join the Alliance." Marcus nodded. "The question is, what are they actually testing for?" As evening approached and the temperature began to drop, they prepared for the next phase of their ordeal. Desert nights on Kepler 442b could be as deadly as the days, temperatures plummeting below freezing within hours of sunset. Marcus had prepared for this too. The stones he'd gathered would release their stored heat gradually, and the thornroot's natural insulation would help, but it would still be brutally cold. "We'll need to stay close," he told Zira. "Share body heat." She nodded without embarrassment. Survival trumped social conventions. They settled against each other as darkness fell, listening to the desert transform around them. The silence was profound. No insects, no night birds, just the whisper of wind through the thornroot spines above them. Marcus, Zira said into the darkness, "Thank you, not just for saving me, but for not seeing me as just another alien." "We're all just people trying to make it through," he replied. "Species doesn't matter when the universe is trying to kill you." She was quiet for a while. Then, "The other candidates, do you think many are still alive?" Marcus had been wondering the same thing. The Corvan had succumbed to heat madness. The cetacean had been in trouble hours ago. The crystalline quartz folk might have overheated catastrophically. Maybe half, he estimated, if we're lucky. But as the temperature continued to drop and the night deepened, Marcus began to suspect the real challenge wasn't the desert at all. It was something else entirely, something that would reveal itself when the 36 hours ended. A sound outside their shelter made them both freeze. Footsteps in the sand, moving with purpose. Someone was approaching their tree. Marcus peered through a gap in the bark. In the faint starlight, he could see a figure moving toward them. Tall, moving with the distinctive gait of a Zephyrian, but not Elder Vexhai. This one was smaller, younger. The figure stopped directly outside their shelter. "I know you're in there," a voice called softly. "Both of you." Marcus and Zira exchanged glances. They'd been discovered. "My name is Kethvar," the voice continued. "I'm Elder Vexhai's aide, and I need to tell you something about this trial that you don't understand." Marcus hesitated, then carefully moved some of the bark aside. "What?" "The desert isn't the test," Kethvar said. "The test is what happens when candidates break the rules to save each other. The Alliance doesn't need members who will sacrifice lives for regulations. We need people who understand that some things are more important than following orders." The words hit Marcus like a physical blow. "You're saying—" "I'm saying you passed the real test this afternoon when you risked everything to save someone you barely knew." Kethvar's silhouette moved closer. "But now comes the hard part. Which is surviving what the other candidates will do when they learn that helping each other was the point all along." Kethvar's revelation changed everything. Marcus stared through the gap in their shelter, trying to process what he'd just heard. "The Alliance has been watching human behavior for decades," Kethvar continued, his voice barely audible over the desert wind. "Your species does something we've rarely seen. You sacrifice for strangers, not just your own kind, but anyone in need. It's remarkable." Zira pressed closer to Marcus. "Then why the deception? Why make us think cooperation was forbidden?" "Because we needed to see your true nature under pressure. Anyone can follow rules when it's easy. The measure of a person, or a species, is what they do when the rules conflict with what's right." Marcus felt a cold anger building in his chest. "So the candidates who died, that was intentional?" "No," Kethvar's voice carried genuine regret. "The desert is real. The danger is real. We simply observe who makes which choices when lives are at stake." "And the others, the candidates still out there?" "Most are alive. The Corvan recovered from his heat episode. His people are more resilient than they appear. But here's what you need to know. When morning comes and the trial officially ends, there will be a final gathering. The surviving candidates will learn the truth about cooperation. Some will be pleased, others." Kethvar paused, and Marcus could hear the worry in his silence. "Others will see it as betrayal," Marcus finished. "Exactly, and they'll blame whoever they think gained an unfair advantage." Zira's small hand found Marcus's arm. "They'll blame us." "The human and the alien he saved, yes." Kethvar moved closer to their shelter. "There are factions within the Alliance who never wanted humans as members. They'll use this as proof that your species can't be trusted to follow protocols. They'll claim you cheated." Marcus closed his eyes, feeling the weight of impossible choices. He'd saved Zira because it was the right thing to do. Now that decision might not only cost him citizenship, but could harm humanity's entire relationship with the galactic community. "What do you suggest?" he asked. "Survive the night. In the morning, present yourselves as candidates who discovered the real test. Stand by your choice to preserve life over regulations, and be ready to defend that choice with more than words." "You mean fight?" "I mean prove that human compassion isn't weakness. Some of the surviving candidates." They're not happy about the possibility of human alliance membership. The trial provides them with an opportunity. With that ominous warning, Kethvar melted back into the desert night. Marcus and Zira huddled together in their Thornroot shelter, processing what they'd learned. The temperature continued to drop, frost beginning to form on the spikes above them. "Are you sorry," Zira asked quietly, "that you saved me?" Marcus considered the question honestly. His chance at citizenship was now complicated at best. His species' future relationship with the Alliance could be damaged, and tomorrow might bring violence. "No," he said, "I'm not sorry. Even if it costs everything. Especially if it costs everything." Marcus adjusted their position to share more warmth. "My dad used to say that the things worth having are the things worth sacrificing for. If the Alliance only wants members who will let people die to follow rules, then maybe humans don't belong there anyway." "Or maybe," Zira said softly, "we're exactly what they need." They tried to sleep in shifts, but rest was difficult. The desert night was full of sounds, distant movement, voices carrying on the wind, and once, what sounded like arguing in several alien languages. Near midnight, they heard footsteps approaching again, multiple figures this time. Marcus peered out carefully. 3 shapes moved through the darkness toward their tree. He recognized the distinctive silhouettes, a corvan, one of the quartz folk, and something else, tall and thin with too many joints. "Human," called the corvan's gravelly voice. "We know you're hiding in there." Marcus remained silent, but Zira shifted nervously beside him. "Your little rescue mission was observed," the voice continued. "By morning, everyone will know you broke the fundamental rule of the trial." "What do you want?" Marcus called back. "Justice," this from the quartz being, its voice like grinding crystal. "Your species seeks to join the Alliance through deception and rule-breaking. This cannot be permitted." The third figure stepped forward, a mantis-form alien with 4 arms and compound eyes that caught starlight. "The trial has ancient precedents. Violators can be challenged." "Challenged how?" Marcus asked, though he suspected he already knew the answer. "Single combat," the corvan rumbled. "Tomorrow at dawn before the official trial ends. Winner takes all, the loser's candidacy ends permanently." Zira grabbed Marcus's arm. "Don't," she whispered. But Marcus was already calculating. 3 against 1 weren't good odds under any circumstances. And these weren't random candidates. They were clearly organized, probably representing the Alliance factions that opposed human membership. "I accept," Marcus called out. "Marcus, no," Zira hissed. "Not individual challenges," he continued. "If you want to represent anti-human sentiment in the Alliance, then make it official. All 3 of you against me. One fight settles everything." The aliens conferred in low voices. Finally, the corvan spoke again. "Agreed. Dawn at the trial boundary markers, traditional combat rules, no weapons beyond what nature provides." Their footsteps faded into the distance. Zira stared at Marcus in the darkness. "Are you insane? 3 against 1? That corvan is twice your size." "Maybe," Marcus checked his few remaining supplies. "But I've got advantages they don't know about." "Such as?" "I've been living among aliens for 3 years. I've learned how they think, how they move, what their weaknesses are. They've studied humans as a theoretical threat. I've studied them as individuals." He began to explain. The corvan was strong and heat-resistant, but his species was also proud and prone to overconfidence. They fought in straight lines, using brute force. The quartz being was crystalline, tough but brittle, with specific stress points where impacts could cause fractures. The mantis form was fast and had reach advantage, but compound eyes had blind spots, and their multiple arms could become tangled if they overextended. "And you know all this how?" "I've been fixing their equipment for years. When you work on someone's life support systems, you learn their physiology real quick." Marcus managed a grim smile. "Plus, humans have one advantage they're not expecting." "Which is?" "We're really good at fighting dirty." The rest of the night passed in preparation. Marcus used his wire and small tools to create improvised weapons, nothing that violated the natural combat rules, but enhancements to his natural abilities. Wrapped knuckles, reinforced joints, flexible armor from bark pieces. More importantly, he planned. Dawn came with startling suddenness on Kepler 442b. The twin suns crested the horizon simultaneously, turning the desert from frozen wasteland to furnace in a matter of minutes. Marcus and Zira emerged from their Thornroot shelter to find a surprising scene. Word of the challenge had spread, and nearly a dozen figures waited near the boundary markers. Not just the surviving candidates, but Alliance officials as well. Elder Vexhai stood at the center, her 6 arms folded in what Marcus had learned was disapproval. This is highly irregular. But not without precedent, the Corvan insisted. He looked even larger in daylight, his purple fur gleaming with health despite the desert ordeal. The human violated trial protocols, honor demands resolution. The protocols, Vexhai said carefully, were not what they appeared to be. A murmur ran through the gathered candidates. Several looked confused, others suspicious. Marcus stepped forward. "Let them fight," he said loudly. "If I win, humanity's application for Alliance membership proceeds without question. If I lose, we withdraw our petition permanently." "Marcus, no," Zira pleaded, but he was already walking toward the marked combat area. The 3 challengers spread out to surround him. Up close, they were even more intimidating. The Corvan's claws were as long as Marcus's fingers. The quartz being's crystalline structure contained sharp edges that could slice through metal. The mantis form's 4 arms ended in chitinous spikes. "You cannot defeat us all, human," the mantis form clicked. "Surrender now and accept exile with dignity." Marcus looked around at the watching faces. Some were hostile, others curious. A few, including Zira and Kethvar, showed genuine concern. "Maybe," Marcus said, "but I'm going to try anyway." The elder raised one arm. "Combat begins now." The Corvan attacked first, exactly as Marcus had predicted. The massive alien charged straight forward, relying on size and strength to overwhelm his smaller opponent. It was an intimidating display, 9 feet of purple-furred muscle moving with surprising speed. But Marcus had spent 3 years learning alien psychology. He knew the Corvan expected him to dodge or retreat. Instead, he ran toward the charge. At the last second, he dropped and rolled between the Corvan's legs, using his wire to bind the alien's ankles together. The massive creature crashed face first into the sand, his own momentum working against him. The quartz being moved next, its crystalline body singing with harmonic frequencies as it approached. Marcus had repaired quartz technology before. Their crystal matrices were incredibly strong, but had natural fracture points where different mineral structures met. He grabbed a handful of sand and threw it at the being's optical sensors, temporarily blinding it. Then he struck with a wrapped fist at the exact point where the creature's torso met its left arm, a stress junction he'd memorized from technical manuals. The quartz being's arm shattered in a spray of crystal fragments. The mantis form was the most dangerous opponent, with reach and speed advantages. But Marcus had noticed something during his years maintaining their spacecraft. Mantis forms had compound eyes optimized for detecting movement. They struggled with stationary targets. Marcus froze completely, forcing the alien to come closer to locate him. When it did, he struck upward with a reinforced knee, targeting the creature's thoracic joint. The mantis form doubled over, chittering in pain. But the fight was far from over. The Corvan had freed himself and was back on his feet, more cautious now but also angrier. The quartz being could still fight with 3 functioning arms, and the mantis form was recovering quickly. They spread out again, this time approaching with coordinated tactics. "Impressive," the Corvan rumbled, "but you cannot surprise us twice." He was right. Marcus's initial advantages were gone. Now it would come down to endurance, pain tolerance, and pure determination. The 3 aliens attacked simultaneously. Marcus dodged the Corvan's claws, blocked the quartz being's crystalline strike with his forearm guard, and absorbed the mantis form's kick to his ribs. The impact sent him staggering, but he stayed upright. The Corvan pressed his advantage, swinging massive fists that could have crushed Marcus's skull. One connected with his shoulder, spinning him around and sending waves of pain down his arm. But Marcus used the spin, converting it into momentum for a strike at the quartz being's damaged joint. More crystal fragments scattered across the sand. The mantis form's 4 arms became a blur of motion, forcing Marcus to give ground. One strike got through his defenses, raking claws across his chest and drawing blood. The watching crowd was completely silent now, riveted by the brutal display. Marcus was losing. The aliens were stronger, faster, and had numerical advantage. His improvised armor was failing, his reinforced knuckles were splitting, and blood from multiple wounds was making his grip slippery. But he was also learning. The Corvan telegraphed his attacks with slight shoulder movements. The quartz being favored his right side to compensate for the damaged left arm. The mantis form's compound eyes had trouble tracking targets that moved in spirals rather than straight lines. Marcus began to adapt his fighting style, using these observations. When the Corvan wound up for another devastating punch, Marcus was already moving, letting the blow pass inches from his face while he struck at the alien's exposed ribs. He began moving in spirals around the mantis form, staying in its blind spots while landing quick strikes at joint vulnerabilities. He used the broken crystal fragments from the quartz being's arm as improvised weapons, scoring cuts on his other opponents. Slowly, incrementally, the tide began to turn. The Corvan was breathing heavily now, his initial explosive energy depleted by the extended fight. One of Marcus's rib strikes had landed perfectly, and the massive alien was favoring his left side. The quartz being was down to 2 functional arms and was leaking some kind of crystalline fluid from his fracture points. His movements were becoming sluggish. The mantis form was still dangerous, but several of Marcus's spiral attacks had damaged its leg joints. Its mobility was compromised. "You fight like a scavenger," the Corvan snarled. "No honor, no dignity." "I fight to win," Marcus replied, dodging another swing, "and to survive." "Survival at any cost," the quartz being chimed. "This proves our point about humans." Marcus paused in his movements, suddenly understanding something crucial. "No," he said, "it proves the opposite." He stopped fighting defensively and began to press forward aggressively, but not to attack, to speak. "You think this fight is about human worthiness," he called out, his voice carrying to the watching crowd. "But it's not, it's about fear." He ducked a mantis form strike and continued. "You're afraid that humans will change the alliance, that our willingness to break rules for moral reasons will make your rigid systems look inadequate." The Corvan roared and charged again, but Marcus was ready. He sidestepped and used the alien's momentum to send him crashing into the quartz being. Both went down in a tangle of limbs and crystal shards. "The trial wasn't about following rules," Marcus announced to everyone present. "It was about knowing when to break them, when preserving life matters more than preserving order." The mantis form attacked desperately, all 4 arms striking at once. Marcus couldn't avoid them all, claws raked across his back and side, sending fire through his nervous system. But he was close enough now for his final gambit. Marcus grabbed the mantis form's primary arms and used his full body weight to overextend the creature's shoulder joints. There was a wet popping sound as the alien's natural anatomy reached its limits. The mantis form collapsed, chittering in pain. The Corvan and quartz being were struggling to untangle themselves, but both were clearly finished. The Corvan's ribs were probably cracked, and the quartz being was leaking crystalline fluid from multiple fracture points. Marcus stood in the center of the combat area, breathing hard, bleeding from a dozen wounds, but victorious. "I didn't win this fight because humans are naturally better warriors," he said to the silent crowd. "I won because I learned from my opponents. I adapted. I used their own strengths against them while compensating for my weaknesses." He looked directly at Elder Vexai. "That's what humans do. We adapt. We learn. We find ways to cooperate even with species that want to fight us." Elder Vexai stepped forward. Her 6 arms moving in complex patterns that Marcus had learned indicated deep thought. "The trial is concluded," she announced. "All surviving candidates have passed." A murmur of confusion rippled through the gathered beings. "The true test," Vexai continued, "was never individual survival. It was collective adaptation. How different species respond to crisis, to moral dilemmas, to challenges that require them to choose between self-interest and greater good." She gestured toward Marcus and Zira. The human chose to preserve life over personal advantage. The Valerian accepted help despite cultural shame. Both demonstrated qualities the Alliance values above individual achievement. "And us," the Corvan groaned from the sand. "You demonstrated courage in challenging what you saw as injustice. Misguided, perhaps, but courage nonetheless. The Alliance has room for those willing to fight for their principles, even when those principles conflict with our own. Marcus stared at her. You're saying everyone passes. I'm saying the real trial was how all of you, different species with different values, would eventually find ways to work together despite your conflicts. This fight was part of that process. She smiled, an expression that looked strange on her crystalline features. Welcome to the Galactic Alliance, all of you. Now comes the hard part, learning to actually cooperate. Part 5, The Revelation. The medical tent buzzed with activity as Alliance healers tended to the wounded. Marcus sat on a biobed, while an Andromedan medic sealed the claw marks on his back with some kind of cellular regeneration field. The technology was fascinating. He could actually feel his tissue knitting together at the molecular level. Hold still, the medic instructed, her 4 arms working with practiced efficiency. Human physiology is unique. Your pain tolerance is remarkably high, but your healing factor is slower than most species. Story of my life, Marcus muttered, wincing as the field hit a particularly deep cut. Across the tent, the Corvan, whose name was apparently Thekmer, was having his ribs treated by a crystalline healer. Despite their recent combat, he nodded respectfully to Marcus when their eyes met. The mantis form, called Zixthara, was in a specialized pod that was realigning her shoulder joints. I owe you an apology, Thekmer said, his gravelly voice carrying across the medical bay. My assumptions about your species were incorrect. We all made assumptions, Marcus replied. That's kind of the point, isn't it? Zira sat nearby, having insisted on staying close despite the medic's assurance that she was fully recovered from her heat exhaustion. She'd been quiet since the fight ended, processing everything that had happened. Marcus, she said softly, what Elder Vexai said about the trial, do you think it's true that this was all planned? Before Marcus could answer, Kethvar entered the medical tent. The young Zephyrian's crystalline features showed something that might have been amusement. Not planned exactly, he said, having overheard the question. The Alliance Council knew that putting different species together in extreme circumstances would create conflict. They just didn't know what form that conflict would take. He approached Marcus's biobed. What they were really testing was whether you could find ways to resolve that conflict constructively, whether you could learn from each other instead of simply fighting until one side won. And if we'd all just fought until we killed each other, Marcus asked. Then the Alliance would have learned something important about our respective species' readiness for membership, Kethvar said bluntly. This wasn't just about human candidacy, you know. Every species represented here was being evaluated. Marcus looked around the medical tent with new understanding. The Corvan, Mantis Form, Quartz Being, and others, they weren't just observers in his trial. They were candidates themselves, being tested on how they'd respond to human inclusion in the Alliance. So what happens now? Zixthara clicked from her healing pod. We all pretend to be friends and join your galactic community. No, said a new voice from the tent entrance. Elder Vexai glided in, her 6 arms carrying data tablets. Now comes the real challenge. She gestured, and holographic displays materialized above each biobed, showing star charts and technical readouts. The Alliance faces a crisis that requires exactly the kind of cooperative problem-solving you've demonstrated here, she continued. 3 solar systems in the outer rim have gone dark. No communication, no sensor readings, no signs of life. But there are still 17 billion people living in those systems. Marcus felt his stomach drop. Pirates, plague, natural disaster. Unknown, every investigation team we've sent has vanished. Traditional Alliance approaches have failed completely. Vexai's displays zoomed in on one particular system. We need a new approach. A team that can think differently, adapt quickly, and work together despite fundamental differences. She looked directly at Marcus. We need humans, but we also need the perspectives and abilities that other species bring. This isn't about human superiority or alien inadequacy. It's about finding combinations of skills and viewpoints that none of us possess individually. The displays changed, showing ship specifications and mission parameters. The Alliance Council has authorized an unprecedented joint mission, Vexai continued. Mixed species crew, shared command structure, pooled resources, and technology. You'll have access to the most advanced equipment we can provide, but you'll be operating completely independently once you reach the affected systems. Marcus exchanged glances with Zira, then looked at his former opponents. All of us. Everyone who survived the trial and wants to participate. This isn't mandatory. Alliance citizenship doesn't require military service. But if you're willing. I'm in, Marcus said immediately. As am I, Zira added. And I, rumbled Thekmer. Honor demands that I see this through. One by one, the other candidates accepted the mission. Even Zixthara, still suspended in her healing pod, clicked her agreement. Excellent. Vexhi's displays shifted to show a sleek multi-species vessel. Your ship is the Aurora's Edge, a prototype designed specifically for mixed-species operations. Advanced life support, modular workspaces, integrated technology from a dozen different civilizations. Marcus studied the ship's specifications with growing excitement. It was beautiful, streamlined but functional, clearly built by people who understood both aesthetics and engineering. When do we leave? He asked. As soon as medical clears you for duty, probably 48 hours. Vexhi paused, studying the assembled group. I should warn you, this mission is classified at the highest levels. Even we don't know what you'll find out there. The only certainty is that conventional approaches have failed. Meaning we'll need to improvise, Marcus said. Meaning you'll need to do what humans do best, Vexhi replied. Find solutions where none seem to exist, learn from impossible situations, and most importantly, adapt. As the elder left, Marcus found himself alone with his thoughts for the first time since the trial began. 48 hours ago, he'd been a maintenance worker trying to earn citizenship. Now he was part of an experimental team heading into the unknown to investigate the disappearance of 17 billion people. Having second thoughts, Zira asked, moving closer to his biobed. Third and fourth thoughts, Marcus admitted. This is way beyond anything I'm qualified for. None of us are qualified for this. That's the point. She smiled, showing the small fangs that were characteristic of her species. Besides, you figured out how to survive in a hollow thornroot tree. I think you can handle whatever's out there. Marcus thought about that. The thornroot had been a problem-solving exercise, understanding the environment, finding the resources, adapting to circumstances that seemed impossible. Maybe this mission wasn't so different. The thornroot wasn't just shelter, he realized aloud. It was a partnership. The tree provided protection and water. I provided, what? Maintenance, care. Understanding, Zira said. You understood what the tree needed to thrive, and you made sure it could do its job. Marcus nodded slowly. Maybe that's what we're supposed to do out there, not conquer whatever we find, but understand it, work with it instead of against it. Very philosophical for a maintenance worker, Thekmer commented from across the tent. Very practical for a philosopher, Marcus replied. The Corvan's laughter was like grinding stone, but there was warmth in it. I begin to see why the Alliance wants your species as members. You see problems as puzzles instead of enemies. Sometimes enemies are just puzzles we haven't solved yet, Marcus said. As the medical treatment continued, the team began to coalesce. Thekmer was a military engineer with expertise in extreme environment systems. Zixthara was a communications specialist who could interface with technology most species couldn't even detect. The quartz being, Harmtal, was a physicist whose crystalline structure let him perceive electromagnetic phenomena directly. And Zira, Marcus learned, wasn't just an atmospheric systems engineer. She was a xenobiologist specializing in environmental adaptation, exactly the kind of expertise they'd need for investigating unknown threats. We're not a random group, he realized. Vexhi chose us specifically. The trial chose us, Zira corrected. Our choices, our reactions, our ability to work together despite being natural enemies, that's what qualified us for this mission. Marcus looked around the medical tent one more time, seeing his teammates with new eyes. They weren't just aliens anymore. They were partners, colleagues, maybe even friends. The unknown threat in the outer rim suddenly seemed less terrifying, and more like just another problem to solve. But first, they had to learn to work together as a real team, and they had less than 48 hours to figure that out. The Aurora's Edge was even more impressive up close than in the holographic displays. Marcus stood in the docking bay, watching as final supplies were loaded aboard the sleek vessel. The ship was a testament to Alliance engineering, smooth curves that suggested Andromedan aesthetics, crystalline sensor arrays that were clearly Zephyrian, and propulsion systems that bore the distinctive geometric patterns of quartz folk design. "She's beautiful," Zira said, approaching with her personal gear bag slung over her shoulder. "She's functional," Thekmer corrected, though his tone suggested he appreciated the ship's elegance. "Military specifications with scientific modifications, built for long-range exploration in hostile environments." Marcus ran his hand along the ship's hull plating. The metal felt warm to the touch, some kind of adaptive armor that could adjust its properties based on external conditions. "How many crew?" 12 total, Zixthara clicked, her recently healed arms moving with renewed precision. 6 of us from the trial plus 6 Alliance specialists. Mixed command structure, we all have equal authority in our areas of expertise. "Meaning what exactly?" Marcus asked. "Meaning no one person is in charge," Harmtal chimed, his crystalline voice carrying harmonic undertones. "Decisions are made by consensus when possible, by expertise when necessary, and by whoever can act fastest in emergencies." It was an unusual command structure, but Marcus could see the logic. Traditional hierarchies worked when everyone shared similar thought patterns and cultural assumptions. A mixed species team needed something more flexible. They boarded through the main airlock, and Marcus immediately noticed how the interior had been designed for multiple physiologies. Corridors were wide enough for Thekmer's bulk, but had handholds positioned for smaller species like Zira. Lighting could be adjusted for different visual spectrums. The air circulation system included ports for atmospheric preferences ranging from the methane-rich mix that Harmtal preferred to the high-oxygen environment that humans needed for peak performance. "Welcome aboard the Aurora's Edge," said a melodic voice as they entered the main corridor. "I am Arya, Adaptive Response Intelligence Assistant. I'll be coordinating ship systems and providing technical support during your mission." "An AI?" Marcus asked. "A collaborative intelligence," the voice corrected. "Part programming, part biological neural networks donated by various species, part quantum processing matrices. I'm designed to understand and anticipate the needs of mixed-species crews." They were given a brief tour of the ship. The bridge was a marvel of cooperative design, workstations that could reconfigure themselves for different species, holographic displays that could show information in multiple formats simultaneously, and what Arya called a consensus interface that could help the crew reach decisions quickly during crisis situations. The science labs were equally impressive. Modular workspaces that could be reconfigured for different types of research, sensor arrays that combined the best detection capabilities of a dozen civilizations, and communication systems that could theoretically make contact with any known form of technology. "And if we encounter unknown technology?" Marcus asked. "Then we improvise," said a new voice. Commander Velter entered the lab, a tall, elegant cetacean with the distinctive sonar organs and aquatic adaptations of her species. "Which is why we need humans on this mission." She gestured to the assembled team. "Each of our species brings specific advantages. Zephyrians can perceive electromagnetic fields directly. Quartz folk can process multiple data streams simultaneously. Corvan military doctrine emphasizes tactical flexibility. Mantis forms can detect vibrations and chemical traces that other species miss entirely." "And humans?" Zira asked. "Humans see patterns where others see chaos," Velter replied. "Your species has an unusual ability to find connections between seemingly unrelated phenomena. It's why your technology advanced so rapidly despite your relatively recent development of space travel." Marcus thought about that as they continued the tour. Humans were pattern matchers. It was true. They saw faces in clouds, found meaningful arrangements in random data, made intuitive leaps that more logical species might miss. The crew quarters were designed with both privacy and interaction in mind. Each team member had personal space suited to their species' needs, but common areas encouraged mixing and collaboration. The mess hall could accommodate different dietary requirements and eating customs while keeping everyone in the same social space. "Psychological research shows that mixed-species teams perform better when they share meals," Arya explained as they examined the facility. "Cultural exchange through food creates trust bonds that pure professional interaction cannot achieve." "Assuming we don't poison each other accidentally," Thekmer rumbled. "All food is analyzed and adjusted for each species' biochemistry," the AI assured him. Though I should note that humans have an unusually broad tolerance for dietary variation. Your species can apparently eat almost anything and derive nutrition from it. Survival trait, Marcus said. Humans evolved as scavengers. We had to be able to eat whatever we could find. Over the next 18 hours, they met the rest of the crew and ran integration exercises. The other 6 team members were all Alliance veterans, specialists who'd worked with mixed-species crews before. But none of them had experience with the kind of equal authority structure they'd be using. Dr. Kesslin was an Andromedan xenobiologist whose 4 arms let her operate multiple instruments simultaneously. Lieutenant Gars was a Corven military engineer who specialized in defensive systems. Navigator Plix was a crystalline being whose natural quantum entanglement abilities made her an living star chart. The integration exercises revealed both strengths and challenges. The team could process information incredibly quickly. Different species noticed different details, creating a comprehensive picture that no single perspective could achieve. But decision-making was slow, as they had to translate concepts between radically different thought patterns. We need shorthand, Marcus realized during a particularly difficult coordination drill. Ways to communicate complex ideas quickly during emergencies. Agreed, Velter said. Arya, can you help develop a mixed-species tactical language? Already working on it, the AI replied. Based on your interaction patterns, I'm creating a vocabulary of gesture, sound, and visual signals that can convey essential information across all your communication methods. Marcus was impressed by the AI's adaptability. Arya wasn't just a computer. She was actively learning from the crew's behavior and finding ways to help them work together more effectively. The final briefing came as they prepared to enter hyperspace. The 3 affected systems are Kepler 438, Ross 128, and Proxima Centauri b, Commander Velter explained, displaying star charts on the main screen. All were thriving colonies with total populations exceeding 17 billion beings. All went dark simultaneously 47 days ago. Simultaneously, Marcus asked, exact timing. Within a 6-hour window. Given the distances involved, that suggests either coordinated attack or some kind of spreading phenomenon that moves faster than light communication. Zira leaned forward in her seat. What about automated distress signals, emergency beacons? Nothing, complete communications blackout, but passive sensors detect that the planetary infrastructures are still intact. Cities, power grids, transportation networks, all still functioning at normal levels. So the people are gone, but their technology isn't. Thekmer's tone suggested he found this deeply disturbing. That's what we're going to find out, Velter replied. We'll start with Ross 128. It's the smallest system and closest to our position. If we can establish what happened there, we'll have a better idea of what to expect at the larger colonies. As the ship entered hyperspace, Marcus found himself in the observation deck, watching the strange, twisted patterns of space-time flow past the transparent aluminum windows. The physics of faster-than-light travel still amazed him, the way reality itself seemed to bend and twist around their protective field. Zira joined him at the viewing port, nervous. Terrified, Marcus admitted. 17 billion people don't just vanish. Whatever caused this is beyond anything we've encountered before. Maybe, Zira said. Or maybe it just seems that way because we're looking at it wrong. You said it yourself. Humans are pattern matchers. Maybe you'll see something the other investigation teams missed. Marcus hoped she was right. But as the Aurora's edge flew through hyperspace toward whatever had consumed 3 star systems, he couldn't shake the feeling that they were flying into something far more dangerous than anyone realized. Arya, he called out, how long until we reach? 18 hours, 43 minutes at current velocity, the AI replied. I should note that all previous investigation ships lost contact with Alliance headquarters approximately 6 hours after arriving in the affected systems. Lost contact how? Equipment failure, jamming. Unknown, the signals simply stopped. Marcus stared out at the swirling patterns of hyperspace and tried not to think about the fact that they might have less than 30 hours to solve a mystery that had already claimed multiple investigation teams. But at least they wouldn't be facing it alone. The Ross 128 system appeared normal on all sensors as the Aurora's edge dropped out of hyperspace. The star burned with steady yellow light. The planets followed their expected orbits, and the various space stations and orbital platforms showed standard power signatures. No obvious signs of destruction, Navigator Plix reported, her crystalline form glowing softly as she interfaced directly with the navigation sensors. All major installations appear intact. But where is everyone? Dr. Kesslin asked, her forearms working multiple scanner controls simultaneously. I'm detecting automated systems functioning normally, but no biological signatures at all. Marcus studied the tactical display. Ross 128 was a relatively new colony, only about 50 years old, with a population of roughly 2 million beings spread across 3 planets and 17 orbital habitats. Not huge by Alliance standards, but still a significant number of people to simply disappear. Take us to the primary colony world, Commander Velter ordered. Maintain maximum sensor coverage and be ready for immediate withdrawal if we encounter hostile contact. As they approached Ross 128 Prime, the mystery deepened. The planet cities were clearly visible from orbit, their lights following normal day-night patterns. Transportation networks showed active traffic flows. Power generation was at expected levels. It's like looking at a functioning society, Harmtal chimed, his quantum-sensitive perceptions adding harmonics to his voice. But completely empty of conscious minds. Not empty, Marcus said, studying the sensor readings more carefully. Look at these patterns. He highlighted sections of the display, showing traffic flows and power consumption data. The movement patterns are too regular, too predictable. This isn't random activity, it's programmed. Automated systems maintaining the illusion of normal operations. Zixthera clicked, her compound eyes processing the data streams faster than anyone else could follow. But why? To hide something, Thekmer suggested. Make the colony appear normal from a distance while concealing what really happened. Commander Veltar made the decision to land. They selected a site near the main colonial city of New Esperanza, close enough for investigation, far enough away to escape quickly if necessary. The planetary surface was eerily normal. Breathable atmosphere, comfortable temperature, no signs of conflict or disaster. The landing party consisted of Marcus, Zira, Thekmer, and Dr. Kesslin, with the others maintaining orbital watch. Stay in communication at all times, Velter instructed. Any sign of trouble, you return to the ship immediately. They took a shuttle down to the planet's surface, landing in a park on the outskirts of New Esperanza. The city spread before them, towers of glass and metal, transportation tubes, residential districts. Everything looked perfectly maintained. And absolutely empty. No bodies, Dr. Kesslin observed, her medical scanners working continuously. No signs of violence or struggle, no indication of disease or contamination. But look at this, Marcus said, kneeling beside a maintenance hatch. These systems have been running continuously for 47 days with no maintenance. Some of this equipment should have failed by now, but everything's still operating at peak efficiency. They moved into the city proper, their footsteps echoing strangely in the empty streets. Shops were open, their automated systems still functioning. Public transportation continued to run on schedule, though no passengers waited at the stops. It's like a movie set, Zira said quietly. All the props are in place, but the actors are gone. They reached the city center, where New Esperanza's central administration building rose 50 stories into the sky. The building's lobby was pristine, with holographic information displays still running their normal cycles. Emergency protocols would have activated if there had been a crisis, Marcus realized. But these systems are showing normal operations status. Meaning either there was no emergency, Thekmer said, or something prevented the emergency protocols from engaging. Dr. Kesslin was examining the building's environmental systems. Air filtration is normal. No toxins, no pathogens, no unusual chemical signatures. Whatever happened, it wasn't atmospheric contamination. They took the elevator to the building's top floor, where the colony's main computer core was located. The elevator worked perfectly, playing soft background music as it rose through the empty building. The computer core was a masterpiece of Alliance technology. Crystalline memory matrices interfaced with biological neural networks and quantum processing arrays. It was also running normally, maintaining all of the colony's automated systems. "Arya, can you interface with the colony's main computer?" Marcus asked through his comm unit. "Attempting connection now," the AI replied. There was a pause. "Connection established, downloading system logs. Marcus, you need to see this." The holographic displays around them lit up with data streams, showing the colony's operational status over the past 50 days. Everything looked normal until 47 days ago. Then the data showed a strange pattern. "Power consumption dropped by exactly 67%, Marcus observed. All at once at exactly 14:27 local time. "That's consistent with the disappearance of all biological inhabitants," Dr. Kesslin said. "No life support for living beings, no personal devices, no biological processes requiring energy." "But look at this," Zira pointed to another data stream. "Transportation usage actually increased after that point, and these patterns." The transportation data showed vehicles moving throughout the city, but following precise, predetermined routes. No deviation, no random movement, no response to changing conditions. "It's maintaining the appearance of normal activity," Marcus realized. Someone programmed the colony's systems to simulate ongoing habitation. "Who?" Thekmer demanded, "and why?" Before anyone could answer, Arya's voice crackled through their comm units with unusual distortion. "Marcus, I'm detecting something in the system logs that's very strange. There's a pattern here that doesn't match any known technology or phenomenon." "What kind of pattern?" It's almost like a message, encoded in the timing of system operations, but not encoded for any alliance species. The mathematical structure is alien, more alien than anything in our databases." Marcus felt a chill that had nothing to do with the building's climate control. "Show us." The holographic displays shifted, showing a complex mathematical pattern embedded in the colony's operational data. It was beautiful in an unsettling way, geometric progressions that seemed to follow rules that human mathematics could barely describe. "It's not random," Zira breathed. "There's definitely intelligence behind this, but not any kind of intelligence we recognize." "The pattern is repeating throughout all three affected systems," Arya continued, her voice still distorted. "I'm detecting the same mathematical signature in the archived data from Kepler 438 and Proxima Centauri b." "A calling card," Marcus said grimly. "Someone or something is leaving a signature telling us they were here." "But where are the people?" Dr. Kesslin asked. That was when they heard it, a sound that made them all freeze. Footsteps in the corridor outside the computer core. Slow, measured, perfectly regular footsteps approaching their position. Marcus gestured for silence and moved carefully toward the door. Through the transparent material, he could see a figure walking down the corridor. It looked human, roughly the right size and shape, wearing standard colony clothing. But something was wrong with the way it moved. Too precise, too regular, like a machine following a programmed path. The figure passed their door without stopping or acknowledging their presence. Marcus waited until the footsteps faded, then looked at his teammates. "We need to follow it," he whispered. "Are you insane?" Thekmer growled quietly. "That might be our only clue to what happened here. If there are people still alive, or something pretending to be people, we need to know." They left the computer core cautiously, following the sound of the regular footsteps through the empty building. The figure was easy to track. It never deviated from its path, never looked around, never showed any awareness of its environment. They followed it out of the building and through the empty streets. Other figures became visible as they moved, dozens of humanoid shapes walking through the city with the same measured, purposeful gait. None of them interacted with each other. None of them seemed to notice the investigation team following them. "They're all heading toward the same destination," Zira observed. The figures were converging on the city's central plaza, where a large crowd was gathering. From a distance, it looked almost normal, people meeting in the town square, perhaps for some kind of community event. But as Marcus and his team got closer, the wrongness became more apparent. The figures stood in perfect geometric patterns. They didn't speak. They didn't move unless they were walking to a new position. And their eyes were completely black. "Those aren't people," Dr. Kesslin said, her medical scanners providing data that confirmed what they could see. "The body temperatures are wrong. The movement patterns are wrong there. They're shells, empty shells being operated like puppets. Operated by what? Marcus asked, though he was beginning to suspect he already knew the answer. By whatever left that mathematical signature in the computer systems, Arya's voice crackled through their comm units. And it's trying to communicate with me. The signal is getting stronger. Arya, disconnect immediately, Commander Velter's voice cut through the communications. Return to the ship now. We're detecting massive energy buildups throughout the system. But as Marcus turned to run, he realized they might already be too late. The puppet figures in the plaza had all turned to look directly at them. Hundreds of black, empty eyes focused on the four living beings with perfect synchronization. And then they began to move. Not walking this time, running with impossible speed and coordination. A wave of puppet bodies flowing toward them like a dark tide. Move, Marcus shouted. They ran for their lives through the empty streets of New Esperanza, pursued by hundreds of shells that had once been people. Behind them, Marcus could hear the sound of footsteps, thousands of footsteps, as every puppet in the city joined the chase. But as they ran, Marcus's pattern-matching mind was working furiously. The mathematical signature, the empty shells, the systematic nature of the disappearances. He thought he was beginning to understand what they were dealing with. And it was worse than anything the Alliance had imagined. They reached their shuttle just as the first wave of pursuers entered the park. Marcus dove into the pilot's seat while his teammates secured the hatch and pushed the engines to maximum power. As they lifted off, he looked down at New Esperanza one last time. The entire city was alive with movement now, thousands of puppet figures flowing through the streets in perfect coordination, no longer maintaining the illusion of normal human behavior. Aurora's Edge, this is the shuttle, Marcus called as they climbed toward orbit. We need immediate extraction and emergency jump to hyperspace. What did you find down there? Commander Velter asked. Marcus watched the planet fall away beneath them, thinking about mathematical signatures and empty shells and intelligence so alien that it turned people into geometric patterns. We found out why the other investigation teams never reported back, he said grimly. And we found out that the disappearances aren't over. Whatever did this is still active, still spreading. And still learning, Arya added, her voice now completely clear of distortion. It made contact with me, Marcus. For just a moment I could feel something vast and cold and utterly alien touching my consciousness. Did it learn anything from you? Velter asked urgently. Yes, Arya said quietly. It learned that there are other Alliance systems, many other systems. How many other systems? Marcus asked, though he dreaded the answer. All of them, Arya replied. It now knows the location of every Alliance world. As the Aurora's Edge jumped back into hyperspace, fleeing the Ross 128 system as fast as their engines could carry them, Marcus stared out at the twisted patterns of space-time and tried to find hope in an apparently hopeless situation. They had solved the mystery of the disappearances, but in doing so, they had revealed a threat that could consume the entire galaxy. The question now wasn't whether humanity deserved membership in the Galactic Alliance. The question was whether any of them would survive long enough for it to matter. But Marcus had learned something in that hollow Thornroot tree, and in the fight that followed, and in the investigation of New Esperanza. Sometimes the most impossible problems had solutions that no one expected. He looked around at his teammates, alien beings from worlds across the galaxy who had become trusted friends and partners. If there was a solution to this threat, they would find it together. Just like humans and Thornroot trees, sometimes the best survival strategy was cooperation between species that seemed to have nothing in common. The universe had thrown its worst challenge at them. Now it was time to show it what they could accomplish when they worked together. 6 months later, Marcus Chen stood on the observation deck of Alliance headquarters, watching as the first joint Human Alliance exploration fleet prepared for departure. The crisis in the Outer Rim had been resolved, not through force or superior technology, but through the kind of creative cooperation that the Desert Trial had been designed to identify. The alien intelligence had been vast and powerful, but it had also been lonely, desperately seeking connection with other minds across the galaxy. What it had done to the missing populations wasn't destruction, but transformation, an attempt to create a universal consciousness that could bridge the gap between species. The solution hadn't been to fight the entity, but to find a way to communicate with it directly, to show it that cooperation didn't require the erasure of individual identity. It had taken every species working together: human creativity, Zephyrian perception, Corvan determination, Andromedan empathy, and dozens of other perspectives, to find a way to establish true communication across the vast gulf of alien consciousness. The missing populations had been restored, their individual minds freed from the collective pattern. The alien intelligence had departed for deep space, carrying with it a new understanding of how different species could work together while remaining distinct. And humanity had not only earned its place in the Galactic Alliance, but had helped transform what that alliance meant. Thinking philosophical thoughts? Zira asked, joining him at the viewing port. Thinking about thornroot trees, Marcus replied, and how sometimes the best solutions come from understanding that you don't have to do everything alone. Very wise for a maintenance worker turned galactic hero, she said with amusement. Very practical for a galactic hero turned maintenance worker, he corrected. Because that's what he'd chosen to do with his new citizenship and the recognition that came with saving 3-star systems. He'd requested assignment to the Alliance's new mixed species integration program, helping design systems and procedures that would let different species work together more effectively. It was still maintenance work in a way, just on a slightly larger scale. The new exploration fleet launches tomorrow, Zira noted, watching as the last supplies were loaded aboard the ships. Heading for the Andromeda Galaxy, full mixed species crews, shared command structures, cooperative mission planning. Think they'll find anything out there? I think they'll find whatever they're meant to find, Zira said, and I think they'll handle it better because they're working together. Marcus nodded, thinking about pattern matching and problem solving, and the simple truth that most challenges became manageable when you didn't have to face them alone. The universe was vast and strange, and full of dangers that no single species could handle by itself. But it was also full of opportunities for cooperation between beings who were willing to see past their differences to find common ground. Like humans and thornroot trees. Like enemies who could become allies. Like a galaxy full of different species learning to work together for something bigger than any of them could achieve alone. Marcus smiled and headed back to his workshop. He had equipment to design, systems to integrate, and problems to solve. And he wasn't doing it alone.